This is the story of Lee N. Robbins, an American psychology professor tasked with tracking the addictions that thousands of soldiers had developed to pot, opium, and heroin during their service in Vietnam. When word got back to America that heroin was spreading throughout the troops, the president at the time, Richard Nixon, declared it to be the country's #1 health problem. Lee's team collected urine samples of the men overseas and found that 40% of them were using heroin, 45% were using opium, 78% were using marijuana, and 95% were drinking alcohol on a regular basis. With 2.7 million Americans serving in Vietnam, fear quickly spread throughout America that soldiers would return as addicted heroin and opium junkies. After all, the substances were highly addictive and incredibly hard to kick. But what the statistics showed was fascinating and shook the foundations of what scientists thought of as addiction. When returning, to save public image, soldiers were rarely punished for their drug use overseas, and instead were offered professional health care and rehabilitation. But most veterans refused this and came straight back to their families to re-enter their lives back home. Even though about half the soldiers were taking heavy drugs regularly in Nam, the rates of addiction between the general public and veterans remained consistent. We can observe from this that stressful and unstable conditions are the main influences for why people take these sort of drugs in the first place. Once they were removed from the war zone, they had no need to use the drugs as a method of keeping themselves dangerously stable. This is not at all what the government expected to happen, and this may explain a lot about why people take these kinds of drugs in the first place. But this study did not end up fitting Nixon's narrative of the war on drugs, and Lee's findings were meant to be kept relatively quiet for years.